It wasn't the creak of the chair that broke my heart, it was the laughter that followed. The porch was my sanctuary. Late afternoon lights spilled across the faded boards, warming the small table where I'd set my tea. The breeze carried the scent of lilac and the faint memory of my husband's hands sanding the wood. Every chair, every rail, he'd built it all, one summer at a time. I never needed fancy things, just the sound of the wind, the weight of quiet, and the comfort of something built with love. That's when Brenda Scott walked over, her heels clicking sharply across the driveway. She was new to the neighborhood, bright hair, loud jewelry, and a laugh that cut through the air. "Oh my, Carol," she said, glancing around. "You really do like vintage, don't you?" She stretched the word vintage like it meant pitiful. Before I could answer, she brushed her manicured fingers along the arm of my old rocker. "Does this thing even hold weight anymore?" She gave it a little push, and the chair groaned in reply. That sound used to soothe me. Now, it made my stomach twist. Her husband, Roger Hale, joined her a moment later, holding his phone up as if to take a picture. "Brenda, don't be rude," he said, though his grin said otherwise. "You could sell this as antique decor online." They laughed together, the kind that echoed and lingered. I saw the curtain twitch next door at Jeff Carter's house, a shadow move across Melissa Lane's window. By the time they left, their voices trailed off. "Did you see her porch? That furniture must be older than we are." When the street grew quiet again, I sat back in the rocker. The wood moaned beneath me, but this time it sounded like an old friend defending itself. My husband, Mark, had carved initials into the side when we were first married, M+C. They were still there, worn, but not erased. I traced them with my finger. "They don't know what you built," I whispered. Inside the house, the light caught the same golden hue of the porch, every table, every cabinet, every piece a part of our story. Brenda might see old wood. I saw years of laughter, of small repairs done with love, of a life we built with our hands when we didn't have money for more. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, something steadier stirred pride. I wouldn't let her laughter decide what stayed or what mattered. The sun slipped lower, touching the porch in amber. The air cooled, but I stayed seated, hands folded around my teacup, feeling the wood's warmth under my palms. They could laugh all they wanted, but I knew one day this porch would speak louder than their mockery, and that very night it did. Everyone wanted me to throw away my memories, as if new wood could replace old love. The gossip started quickly. I heard it first from Frank Donovan, who stopped by the next morning with a bag of oranges from his backyard. "Carol," he said carefully, "you know how folks talk. Brenda was showing pictures of your porch furniture at Amanda Shaw's barbecue yesterday evening." I felt the blood leave my face. "Pictures," he nodded, shame softening his tone. "She called it your museum collection. People laughed, but you could see some didn't like it. That hurt worse, not the laughter, but the quiet pity that came after." At the grocery store, a few days later, I passed Doug Parker and Jeff Carter by the produce aisle. They lowered their voices as I reached for apples. "She's sweet," Doug said, "but that furniture's got to go. Maybe her husband made it or something," Jeff replied. "Still, you'd think she'd move on." I kept my eyes on the apples, hands trembling slightly. Move on, as if grief had an expiration date. That evening, my daughter Denise Matthews called. Her voice was bright but tight, the way it got when she was trying to fix something. "Mom, maybe it's time to freshen up the place," she said. "You know, make it more modern. People notice things like that." I almost laughed. "Sweetheart, I'm not decorating for the neighbors. I just don't want them talking," she said. "They already are," I told her softly. "And I'm still here." There was silence, then a sigh. "I just don't want you feeling left behind." I looked around the living room, at the oak coffee table Mark built from scrap lumber, at the small imperfections he'd left on purpose because, as he used to say, things with stories shouldn't look perfect. I smiled. "I'm not behind, Denise, I'm just remembering." After we hung up, I walked through each room, touching the wood grain, the cool brass handles, the drawers that stuck a little from years of use. Each creak and scratch was proof of a life that didn't break when he was gone. It just changed shape. Outside, the evening breeze carried faint laughter from down the street. Brenda's voice, again, high and polished, floating over like perfume that lingered too long. But this time, I didn't flinch. I sat on my porch and let the sound pass through me. The sky turned violet, the air thick with the smell of rain. I wrapped my shawl tighter and watched the light fade on the chairs they mocked. Each piece glowed, as if the memory of Mark's touch still lived in the grain. They could whisper, gossip, or laugh, all they wanted. Let them build their perfect houses filled with hollow things. Mine was built on memory, and memory, I was learning, doesn't rot. Still, part of me wondered what would happen if their laughter ever turned to need. And that thought, quiet and steady, stayed with me long after the rain began to fall. The night the lights went out, the laughter stopped. It began with a single low rumble, not thunder, but something deeper, the kind that rolls through your bones before it touches your ears. I was in my kitchen rinsing a teacup when the window panes rattled. Outside, the wind picked up the way a warning started, soft at first, then suddenly wild. By the time I stepped onto the porch, the sky had turned the color of steel. Leaves swirled across the street, and the air carried that strange electric smell that only comes before a storm. Across the way, Brenda's grand new house shimmered with light, her glass balcony catching every flicker of lightning like it was showing off. I'd seen storms like this before. Mark and I used to count the seconds between thunder and flash. He'd say, "If you can count past 5, it's still far away." But that night, I didn't make it to 2. The wind screamed through the neighborhood, bending trees, tossing trash bins like toys. I watched as a branch snapped clean off Brenda's maple and hit her shiny car with a metallic thud. A gust tore through the street, slamming my screen door against the frame. I caught it just in time, heart pounding. Then, everything went black. For a moment, silence, then shouts, dogs barking. Somewhere, a child was crying. I reached for the flashlight on my counter and looked around my home, still standing, solid, still breathing with the storm. The old furniture creaked, but not in fear, more like it remembered this rhythm. These walls had weathered decades of rain, snow, and wind. They knew how to hold. Another flash lit up the window. Through it, I saw Brenda's house lights flickering wildly before cutting out altogether. A bright orange glow flickered near the side, then smoke curled upward. My heart clenched. "Oh no," I whispered. Their modern smart home wiring must have shorted in the surge, something my old, simple setup avoided. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. The storm must have taken the tower out. All I could do was stand by the window, watching panic unfold across the street. Roger's voice carried faintly through the howling wind, yelling her name, calling for help. It wasn't long before I saw them rushing out, rain pounding over their heads, Brenda holding a blanket against her chest like it could stop the storm itself. They climbed into their car, then right back out when it wouldn't start, likely flooded from the downpour. The sound of thunder swallowed their shouts. Meanwhile, I sat on my sturdy old porch rocker, candlelight flickering behind me, a strange calm settling in. Everything Mark built still stood, every nail, every joint. The water streamed off the roof, but didn't leak a drop inside. Even the porch railing he'd reinforced years ago held strong against the gusts. As the storm roared, I thought of Brenda's laughter echoing across this same yard just days ago. I didn't wish harm on her, not once, but there was something sobering, something just in watching the world remind her that not everything old is weak. When the thunder softened and the rain turned to a hush, I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it. The story wasn't done yet, and I was right, because that was when I heard the knock. They once laughed at my furniture, now they clung to it for safety. The sound startled me. 3 sharp knocks, frantic and uneven, followed by a voice trembling in the dark. "Carol, please, it's us." I froze for a heartbeat. The clock on the mantel read 12:03 a.m. The storm had faded to drizzle, but the world outside was still wrapped in shadow. I opened the door slowly, and there they were, Brenda and Roger, drenched, shivering, their faces pale beneath the porch light. "Can we come in?" Brenda asked. Her voice cracked halfway through. Behind her, the street glistened with rain and smoke. In the distance, I could still see the faint flicker of emergency lights, far too late for comfort. For a moment, I just looked at her. The same woman who once sneered at my porch now stood trembling before it. I could have turned her away. Maybe part of me wanted to, but then I saw the way her hand clutched Roger's arm, the same way I once held Mark's during storms, and just like that, the bitterness dissolved. "Come inside," I said quietly. They stepped in, dripping water onto the old wooden floor. The smell of smoke clung to them. I guided them toward the living room, where candles cast a soft amber glow across the furniture they'd mocked. Brenda hesitated before sitting down, eyeing the sturdy armchair like it was something holy. This is, she whispered, touching the armrest. It's warm. Solid oak, I replied. My husband built it. Roger sat across from her, his hands trembling slightly. We had an electrical fire, he said. Whole house. It just caught, his voice cracked. The fire department's on the way, but we had nowhere else to go. Your place is the closest. And we saw your candlelight. I poured them both tea from the kettle I'd warmed on the gas stove. The steam rose between us, softening the silence. Brenda wrapped her hands around the cup, staring into it. Her mascara had streaked down her cheeks. Carol, I don't know what to say, she murmured. I've been awful to you. I shrugged gently. Storms have a way of making people see what lasts. For a long time, the only sound was the rain tapping the windows. The house creaked faintly, the old furniture settling like it always did, strong, steady, dependable. Brenda glanced around, her eyes tracing the handmade shelves, the carved legs of the table, the glowing wood that seemed to hold the light instead of reflecting it. You kept everything, she said softly. I kept what mattered, I replied. Roger nodded, glancing toward the window. Guess there's something to be said for things built the right way. Brenda exhaled shakily, then looked at me again. I thought we were moving forward, you know, making everything perfect. But now I'd give anything just to have something real. Her words caught in the air, like an apology that didn't need finishing. I smiled faintly. Real doesn't shine, it endures. The wind howled once more outside, rattling the windows, and yet the house stood unshaken. The candle flames flickered but didn't go out. Brenda pulled the blanket I'd given her tighter and leaned back against the chair, her laughter once mocked. She looked at me with eyes that weren't proud anymore, just grateful. Carol, she said softly, I'll never forget this. Neither will I answered. We sat there, three people bound by a storm, surrounded by the quiet music of rain on old wood. In the stillness, I thought of Mark. I imagined him smiling somewhere, not with triumph, but with peace. He'd built these walls not to impress anyone, but to protect the people inside them. And that night, his work had done both. Outside, the sky began to lighten with the promise of dawn. The neighborhood looked smaller, somehow humbled. And though I didn't say it out loud, I knew this night had changed everything, because the woman who once mocked my memories now found shelter in them. And that, I realized, was a kind of justice no storm could wash away. Every mark on this table isn't damaged, it's memory. Brenda sat near the fireplace, wrapped in the old plaid blanket I'd handed her earlier. The storm outside had quieted into a soft drizzle, the kind that sounded like whispers on the roof. My house glowed with the soft hum of candlelight, shadows stretching across the walls like familiar friends. She ran her hand over the table's surface, tracing the grooves her laughter once mocked. It's smooth in some places, rough in others, she said softly. Did your husband really make all this? I nodded, setting another log onto the fire. Every bit of it. Mark built this table before we even had curtains on the windows. Brenda's eyes softened. She looked down at the table again. It's beautiful, she whispered, as though she was afraid to disturb the air. I smiled faintly. He always said a house should be filled with stories, not just things. Every piece here holds one. I walked over to the old hutch by the wall. Its edges were uneven, its doors slightly off-center. This, I said, running my fingers along the wood, was the first thing he made after we got married. We didn't have money for store-bought furniture, so he used scrap wood from an old barn outside town. I told him it was crooked, he said. So are most good things. Brenda chuckled softly, the sound fragile. This chair, I continued, pulling it slightly away from the table, he built when Denise was born. He stayed up all night sanding it by hand so I could sit and rock her to sleep. There's a dent on the armrest from where her little teeth left marks when she was teething. I couldn't sand them out. I wanted them to stay. I gestured toward the picture frame above the mantel, rough, handmade, corners slightly misaligned. And that frame, he carved it from our old porch railing after the first winter, nearly broke it. He said, if something holds once, it can hold again. That was his way of fixing everything, with patience and faith. The firelight flickered across Brenda's face. She wasn't looking at the furniture anymore. She was looking at me, eyes glassy, breath unsteady. I had no idea, she whispered. I thought it was just old wood. It's never just wood, I said. Every scar tells how it survived. Same with people. She bit her lip, as if holding back tears. The clock ticked softly in the silence that followed, steady, forgiving. Outside, the storm had faded into mist. Inside, it was quieter still, a space filled with the weight of understanding. Poured another cup of tea and sat across from her. Mark used to say that love leaves fingerprints. I said, some people wipe them away. I keep them. Brenda nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the table. You do, she murmured. You really do. And for the first time since she moved in, she didn't look like a woman who owned everything. She looked like someone trying to remember what having something truly meant. The fire crackled, and in its glow, I could almost see Mark smiling through the warmth of the wood. That was when Brenda's voice broke. She thought I was clinging to the past, but I was holding on to meaning. It started as a tremor in her voice. Brenda pressed her fingers to her lips, trying to steady herself, but her words spilled out like rainwater over a cracked dam. I don't even know why I laughed, she said. I guess because I always laugh first, before anyone else can. You know, I grew up poor. We had nothing. I swore I'd never live that way again. So I worked, and I bought things, every new couch, every new set of plates, every upgrade. I thought if I surrounded myself with enough new, I could forget how small I felt back then. Her breath hitched. But nothing ever stayed. Every year, something broke, something newer came along. Even our house, I never felt at home in it. Just to Perry. I leaned forward slightly, and tonight, she met my eyes. They were red, raw, tonight. When the fire started, when I watched everything burn, I didn't think of the things I lost. I thought of the one thing I never had, a place that felt like this. The words hung in the air, soft, honest, heavy. She wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. You don't know how ashamed I am, Carol. The way I talked to you, the things I said. I shook my head gently. Storms strip away what's false. What's left is truth. She exhaled shakily. I just wanted people to think I'd made it, that I mattered. I reached across the table, my hand resting lightly on hers. Her skin was cold, but her grip tightened. You do matter, I said. You just forgot where to look. Her eyes filled again, but this time with something softer. Gratitude, maybe, or peace. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and brought her another cup of tea. Chamomile, the same blend Mark used to make when my heart was too full for words. I placed it in front of her, the steam curling between us like forgiveness made visible. You don't owe me anything, I said. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something you accept. She nodded slowly. I don't think I've ever been forgiven before. Then, let this be your first time, I said with a small smile. The rain picked up again, but softer now, like a lullaby against the windows. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and tea. Brenda leaned back in the chair, her eyes closing briefly. It's strange, she murmured. This old furniture, it feels alive. I smiled, watching the light dance across the table's surface. That's because it is. It remembers, just like we do. The fire cracked, sending a burst of golden sparks up the chimney. Brenda's tears caught in the glow, like tiny stars. I wish I could build something that lasts, she said quietly. You just did, I told her. You built honesty. That's where everything strong begins. The room fell into gentle silence, filled only by the rhythm of rain and the heartbeat of the house. Brenda's breathing steadied, her shoulders eased. The pride that once framed her every word had softened into something tender, human. When she finally looked at me again, her eyes carried a kind of gratitude that words couldn't hold. Thank you, she whispered. For what? I asked. For not giving up on meaning, she said, and for letting me sit in it for a while. The clock ticked softly. I reached for my cup, taking a slow sip. Outside, the first trace of dawn began to touch the horizon, pale gold through thinning clouds. The night had burned away what was false. All that remained was truth, and wood that remembered love. And as I looked around my living room, the same one that once drew laughter, I realized something deeper than pride, deeper even than justice. I hadn't just kept Mark's furniture. I'd kept his faith in people, in forgiveness, in what endures. And that, I thought, was the kind of inheritance worth passing on. The morning light revealed more than the damage. It revealed understanding. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. When I stepped onto the porch that morning, the air smelled of rain and soil, sharp, sweet, and alive. The sky was pale gold, streaked with pink, as if even heaven wanted to apologize for the night before. Brenda stood in my yard, her once flawless hair tangled, her expensive shoes coated in mud. She looked smaller somehow, not because she was standing lower, but because pride had drained from her shoulders. Roger was clearing fallen branches with my old garden rake, the handle worn smooth by years of Mark's hands. Your porch held through, Brenda said quietly, almost to herself. Half our roof's gone. I nodded, watching her eyes trace the furniture she had once laughed at, the chairs with faded varnish, the porch swing that creaked when the wind passed through. They were still there, unbroken, unchanged. She brushed her fingers along the armrest of one chair, then stopped. I don't know how you kept all this looking so alive, I smiled. It's not about keeping it looking new, it's about letting it live. She looked up, frowning in confusion. I didn't explain. Some lessons aren't meant to be spoken. They're meant to settle, like sunlight after rain. Inside, the living room still glowed with the warmth of candlelight, though it was day. Brenda followed me in, carrying a towel to help wipe the floors. We worked in silence, the kind of silence that heals, not divides. Every so often, she'd glanced at the handmade table by the window, the one she'd once called a relic. Now, she seemed to study it as though it were a story she wanted to understand. After a long pause, she said softly, Carol, do you think maybe you could help me find something real for my house, something with history? Her voice trembled slightly, the sound of a person realizing that money can't buy meaning. I smiled, not in triumph, but in quiet peace. Real isn't found in stores, Brenda. It's found in the hands that make it, and the hearts that keep it. She nodded, looking out the window. The morning light touched her face, softer now, gentler. For the first time, I didn't see arrogance in her eyes. I saw gratitude. And in that silence, that fragile, golden silence, forgiveness took root. Over the next few days, as the neighborhood cleaned up, Brenda stopped by often. We talked about repairs, and she shared more about her past, hints of hardship that explained her sharp edges. My old friend Diane Warren joined us one afternoon, bringing her own stories of handmade heirlooms, helping Brenda see value in the imperfect. What they once laughed at became what everyone wanted. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood changed gradually. Where there was once chatter about who had the newest kitchen set, or the biggest patio umbrella, there were now murmurs about repair, craftsmanship, memory. It started small, Brenda asking me to show her how to polish old wood instead of throwing it out. Then, Melissa Lane from 2 doors down brought me her grandmother's rocking chair, asking if I could help restore it. Doug Parker and Jeff Carter joined in, sharing tools and tales from their own family histories. One by one, they came. Soon, my garage, once cluttered with dust and silence, turned into a workshop filled with sawdust and stories. Mark would have loved it. That's when the idea came. A community auction, not for profit, but for pride. We called it the Heritage Fair. Everyone brought something old, a frame, a chair, a clock, and learned how to bring it back to life. Denise drove over to help organize it, her perspective shifting after hearing about the storm and Brenda's change. I get it now, Mom, she said. This isn't about staying stuck. It's about honoring what got us here. The day of the auction, the sun shone bright and clean. Tables lined my driveway, each one displaying something once forgotten but now reborn. There was laughter, not cruel, not mocking, but warm and genuine. Brenda stood beside me, her hands nervously folded. In front of her sat the very same chair she'd once ridiculed, Mark's favorite porch chair, polished and recushioned. It was her first bid. When the gavel tapped and the crowd cheered, Brenda smiled through tears. I don't deserve this, she whispered. I placed my hand on hers. Maybe not then, but now, yes. As the afternoon light faded, the air filled with music and chatter. The same neighbors who once laughed now gathered around the very furniture they mocked, sipping tea, sitting in chairs carved decades ago, feeling the weight of memory beneath them. When Brenda stood to make a toast, her voice cracked. Carol taught us something. I wish I'd known sooner that beauty isn't about perfection, it's about permanence. The crowd clapped. I smiled, not because they finally understood, but because I'd never needed them to. I looked around at the people, the laughter, the golden light bouncing off the old wood, and for a brief moment, I could almost feel Mark beside me, his calloused hand on mine, his voice saying, "See, I told you it'd last." And it had, because what they once laughed at became what everyone wanted, not for how it looked, but for what it meant. Luxury fades. Legacy doesn't. There's something about the sound of old wood in the morning, the faint crack, the soft hum, the sigh that whispers time has passed but not one. That's how I feel when I run my hand over the edge of the dining table. Mark built 50 years ago. It's uneven, smooth in some places, rough in others. Just like life, people often think time weakens things, but sometimes time only softens them, makes them gentler. Truer wood is like that. So are people. When I was younger, I believed what the magazines said, that beauty meant newness, that success meant shine. Every home ad showed spotless counters, spotless smiles, rooms that looked more like museums than places where people lived. But the older I got, the more I realized perfection is lonely. It doesn't hold stories. It only holds dust. I still remember Brenda's words that day on the porch, the laughter, the disbelief that I'd hold on to something so old. I can't blame her entirely. The world teaches us to chase the next thing, to replace before repairing, to decorate instead of preserve. But the thing about luxury is, it expires. Legacy doesn't. Luxury lives on credit cards and trends. Legacy lives in fingerprints, in the way a chair creaks when you sit the same way your husband did. It's in the faded patch of varnish where your child once spilled juice. It's in the scratches that you never buffed out because they reminded you of life happening. Used to worry that maybe I was just sentimental, that holding on meant I was afraid to move forward, but now I see. Holding on isn't about fear, it's about respect. Respect for where we came from. Respect for what carried us this far. Denise came by last week, bringing her daughter, my little Lily, and I caught her tracing her fingers over the grain of the porch swing. "It's rough," she said. I smiled. "That's what makes it strong." She tilted her head, curious, the same way Denise used to when she was her age. I told her the swing creaks because it remembers every laugh, every argument, every night I waited for Mark to come home from the late shift. It's all in the wood. I think about that now, how our lives leave marks, not just on things, but on each other. We try so hard to polish ourselves, to hide the wear and tear, but maybe the wear is the worth. Brenda understands that now. Her home looks different these days. Less chrome, more oak. She told me she feels rooted for the first time. That word stayed with me. Rooted. You can't grow roots in glass floors or stainless steel. You grow them in earth and wood and memory. I sit here now, listening to the faint ticking of the clock, Mark repaired with a bent nail, and too much love. The world outside moves faster than ever. New gadgets, new trends, new rules for what's beautiful. But I've stopped trying to keep up. Because beauty, I've learned, isn't in the keeping up, it's in the holding on. If you asked me what I'd trade this life for, the laughter, the loss, the old chair creaking beneath me, the answer would be simple: nothing. Because this isn't just furniture. It's proof. Proof that things built with love last longer than things bought with pride. Luxury fades, legacy doesn't. And if you listen close enough, you can hear the legacy in the wood, telling you you're still here. And that's enough. If your old chair could speak, what story would it tell? Evening falls the same way it always does. Slow, golden, familiar. I pour myself a cup of tea and step onto the porch. The sky glows like amber through the trees, and the world smells faintly of sawdust and lilac. The chair creaks as I sit, the same sound Mark used to make when he'd sigh after a long day. I smile. That sound used to make me feel old. Now it makes me feel home. The neighborhood hums softly beyond the fence. Children laugh. Someone's grill crackles. Somewhere, Brenda's wind chimes sing, soft, hesitant, like they're still learning the tune of gratitude. I glance around at the furniture, all the pieces that have carried my life, the swing, the table, the old bench by the fence. Each one has something to say that swing. It remembers first kisses and last arguments. That table, it remembers birthday cakes, hospital bills, and one Christmas when we couldn't afford gifts, so Mark carved me a wooden rose instead. That bench, it remembers Denise at 16, crying about her first heartbreak, and me. I remember them all. It's funny, isn't it? We spend years chasing after things that sparkle, only to find peace in what simply stays. You know, sometimes I imagine this porch as a storyteller's stage. Every scratch, every dent, every faded corner, it's a chapter. And every visitor adds a sentence. That's the beauty of age. Really, you stop needing everything to be flawless. You just want it to mean something. I take a sip of tea and look straight ahead, not at the horizon, but at you. Yes, you, sitting somewhere out there, listening to my story. Tell me, what do you have in your home that still remembers you? A ring, a quilt, a photograph, maybe a chair that's seen more laughter than 1,000 parties ever could. Don't hide it, don't replace it, Don't let the world convince you it's outdated, because every old thing that survives, every dented pot, every faded frame, is a testament that you did, too. If your old chair could speak, what story would it tell? Maybe it would tell of the meals you shared, the letters you wrote, the nights you stayed up waiting for news that changed your life. Maybe it would tell of tears, the quiet ones that fell when no one was watching. Or maybe it would just say thank you for not throwing it away when the world said you should. I've learned something through these years. Furniture, like people, doesn't need to be perfect to be worthy of love. It just needs to be real. So, tonight, as the last bit of daylight slips through the cracks of this porch, I run my hand along the armrest one last time. The wood is warm, alive, listening, Mark used to say. One day, they'll understand what you see in these old things. He was right. Now, when people walk by, they don't laugh, they wave, they stop to ask how the Heritage Workshop is going, or if they can bring something for restoration. The laughter turned into legacy. And as the crickets start their evening song, I close my eyes, whispering to the night, thank you for staying, because in the end, maybe that's all we want, for something, or someone, to stay. So go on, look around your home, find that one thing that's been with you through it all, the chipped cup, the faded photo, the old chair that creaks in the same spot every time you sit. And when you do, don't fix it, don't hide it, just listen, because sometimes, the stories worth keeping aren't written in books. They're carved in wood, and that's where legacy lives.